with this recorded session. Sorry about that. So we'll have both sessions recorded and available to view on our website before the end of the month. So thank you for your patience with that. So we'll do our brief HCBS overview. We'll do an introduction to the provider self-assessment, kind of the why behind it. Then we'll actually do the self-assessment tool review together. I'll do a quick summary just to remind you why we're doing all of this. We'll also have some information on upcoming training, the differential adjusted payment, and more information. So the intent of the HCBS rules. The purpose is really to enhance the quality of life for our HCBS members. It's also to provide protections for those participants around the rights that they get to have. These are blanketed rights. Our members do not have to earn them. And you can use the person-centered planning process if there are any health and safety concerns about the rights. And that is an individualized process. So these rules are to assure full access to the benefits of community living, to make sure our members are in the most integrated setting, which is luckily something we already do, and to make sure our members receive services to the same degree of access as people not receiving Medicaid services. And this is a big culture shift. Again, these rights are afforded to all of our members. They don't have to be earned. And those services, supports, and the restrictions around health and safety will have to be individualized through that person-centered planning process.
And Danielle, this is Sarah Johnson from Access. I'd like to just add, I think the thing that's helpful for people is to think about what's normative. So that's always kind of the litmus test, if you will, for thinking about whether or not somebody's rights under these rules would be violated. We're looking at what's normative for people of that age and that community. What do you and I experience every day in our home that we live in, or the places that we go to, choose to go to as the part of our day, whether it's work or to other activities. That's always going to be the place that you start to see whether or not that these rights may be violated. And we can't stress it enough, and so I'll say it again, in addition to what Danielle said, is that any restriction of these rights is individualized and is prescribed through the person-centered planning process. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 people in a group home, each person in the group home's rights are restricted, could be restricted differently. And so it's really truly about the individual and what their needs are and what their life expectations are.
The settings that will be impacted and have to comply with the HCBS rules will be our residential settings, assisted living facilities, DD group homes, DD adult and child developmental homes. For non-residential settings, that's adult day health, DD day treatment and training programs, center-based employment programs, which are going to transition to a pre-vocational service. We'll be talking about that a little bit more when we get to the employment tool, and DD group support employment programs. All of these settings have to come into compliance by March of 2022. And the whole purpose for this training is to let you know how we're going to get there. Just a reminder for anyone who missed our last meeting, this is our new branding effort. You know, calling it the HCBS rules, anytime you use the word rules, it can have a negative connotation. So we wanted to brand it a little bit different because from this point forward, it is our new standard of care for our members. And we wanted to really focus on the member's choice and supporting our members to live their life like anyone else has the option to. With the help of our steering committee, we came up with equality through choice. So you'll see this logo on our website when it's updated, and a lot of our communications will be coming out. So with the HCBS rules, Arizona really has a new opportunity to serve our members in a different way. We have a new standard set of basic rights, again, that are afforded to all of our members that don't have to be earned. It reinforces the priority of serving members in the least restrictive setting, something we already do well. And it formalizes a new priority to make sure that our members are actively engaged and participating in their communities in the way that they see fit. So now we're going to talk a little bit behind the why of the HCBS provider self-assessment. It is part of an overall quality monitoring tool suite, which will include the setting self-assessment, which the provider will complete prior to the health plan going out for an on-site assessment, which is part of the normal process, aside from having the provider complete anything up front. Your quality management people from the health plans already do these annual assessments. This is just going to be adding to what they're looking for. So on the provider side, you only have to worry about doing the self-assessment, and your health plans will provide you directions and walk you through doing that prior to their on-site visit. While the quality management people from the health plan are doing their on-site assessments, they'll be doing member and member representative interviews, member file reviews, observations, and community interviews. Again, it's just this new provider self-assessment is going to be part of the current annual monitoring process done by the health plans, something we already have in place. The health plans are going to prioritize those providers who may need more technical assistance. The whole purpose of the assessment tool suite is to gauge your compliance with the HCBS rules. It's not to kick you out of the HCBS program or negatively impact you. It's just to see how compliant may need some technical assistance to make sure that you're fully compliant by March of 2022. That's our overall goal, and we'll be working with the health plans closely and some providers to make sure that we can all get there. And again, the providers will need to complete the self-assessment prior to the health plan's on-site visit. So this will be a tool that you complete, which is a little bit different than the normal annual assessment process. A big part of the HCBS rules is determining which settings meet CMS's threshold for the qualities of an institution. CMS is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They're our federal oversight partner. They have decided that the qualities of an institution, which would not be home and community based, is any setting located in a building that is also a publicly or privately operated facility that provides inpatient institutional treatment, or any setting that's located in a building on the grounds of or immediately adjacent to a public institution. And those are pretty black and white, and I will say that being presumed to have the qualities of an institution, again, does not mean you cannot be an HCBS provider. It means that we're going to have to go through a heightened scrutiny process with CMS and prove to them how you can come into compliance with the HCBS rules, which is, again, a big part of these quality monitoring tools, that's going to be our proof that you can come into compliance. The third prong here is a little bit less black and white. The setting has the effect of isolating individuals that receive Medicaid services from the broader community of people not receiving Medicaid services. So through our tools and through the provider self-assessment, I'll show you how we've kind of figured out how we can figure out if the setting is isolating or not. It's not an exact science, not a lot of this is, but we need to make sure that we can prove to CMS that any setting that does have that effect of isolating, again, can come into compliance through that heightened scrutiny process. The whole goal of this is to make sure that everyone's compliant and continuing to provide services. Again, we don't want to penalize providers. We want to make sure that you're serving our members. So why heightened scrutiny? CMS created this process to help the states preserve those settings that are presumed to have the qualities of an institution. So if we assert that the setting can comply with the HCBS rules, which is part of the quality monitoring process, will be showing CMS the tools, how compliant you are, and any technical assistance or remediation strategies we've come up together to make sure the setting can come into compliance. And CMS will make that determination whether or not the evidence supports our findings, which is why these tools are so important, to show what a good job you are doing and how compliant you are, and in any areas you're struggling, how you're going to get there.
And I would say too, Danielle, I would add that, I mean, anytime we talk about an assessment or audit or monitoring, sometimes that's concerning to providers, just because it is oversight. But initially, it's okay that you're not there yet. That's why we have 2 years. That's why we're doing technical assistance. And so it's really imperative to be really honest and candid about where your weaknesses are, so we can all support you to come into compliance, as Danielle's been talking about. That's our goal and our effort. But if we go through the process and then later on we find out something, that jeopardizes, that puts you in a more precarious situation than if you were honest up front and candid, and then we supported the health plans and access and kind of the community as a whole of people who provide services to Medicaid members support you to come into compliance. So it's really imperative that day one that you're really honest about where you are.
Thank you, Dara. So now we're going to jump into reviewing the actual tools. I'm going to start with the residential self-assessment. We do have it broken out by elderly and physically disabled health plans versus DDD. I'm going to concentrate on the elderly and physically disabled self-assessment tool because it's the most inclusive. It has every measure you could think of. So the only difference between that one and the DD tool is a little bit of the wording, and then there's some items that are completely gone because we're still working out some of these processes internally with DD to make sure that everything aligns with Article 8, and that takes a little bit of time.
And Danielle, by EPD, you mean residential. We're primarily talking about assisted living.
Yes, thank you. So that will be the first tool that we cover. We'll then move into the day program tool, and rather than go through the entire tool that's, you know, and cover some of the same information, I'm just going to point out what's different, and then we'll do the same with the employment tool. So we'll just point out, you know, just those different pieces. But let me pull this up. Please bear with me just a second.
And Danielle, while you're doing that, maybe I can just add in that is the other tools that Danielle mentioned, like the member interviews, like the community interviews, like the observation tool, which is kind of just hanging out in your environment for a period of a few hours and taking note of a few things. Those other tools are going to help validate your self-assessment. So your self-assessment is the foundation of the quality monitoring visit, and then the health plan is filling in with these other ways of gathering information, observing what's going on, talking to people who are served by your program or your facility, and then it is then validating the fact that you've said, we're strong here, we might be a little weak here, or we were weak here a year ago, but now we've implemented some new programming, and now we are at this place. So just to kind of give you a little bit of context around the use of the other tools.
Thank you, Dara. So we'll get started. This is,
Oh, you need to show that, I think.
oh, am I not sharing?
I'm not seeing it.
No, I'm sharing. You're not seeing it on your thing? All right, hold on one second. I'm going to make sure that this is all sharing correctly. Can you see it now?
I can.
Okay. Sorry about that. So now we'll get started. Just a couple instructions for completing this when you do get it from your health plan. We expect the setting to identify 1 or 2 people that are going to complete the actual self-assessment for the setting. It should be someone who oversees day-to-day operations on site at that setting. probably someone in a management position and someone who's regularly on site interacting with the staff and with Access members. Again, for this tool, there is no right or wrong answer. We just need your initial reaction to these questions. There's no pass or fail. I cannot stress that enough. We are just trying to gauge your compliance so that we can provide technical assistance and make sure that all settings come into compliance by that March of 2022 deadline. For most of these questions up front, we totally understand that this is just a point in time of when you're completing the survey, as far as some of these demographic things and number of members, items like that. We understand that the information could change by the time the health plan comes out on site to validate. You know, these are just trying to help us get a feel for what your setting is. You know, there's going to be a big difference between a small assisted living center and a gigantic assisted living facility. So to just help us to better prepare when we go out for the on-site. Most of, aside from this demographic portion, most of these questions are going to be yes or no. You're just going to determine whether or not the question is applicable to your setting, and then you'll provide documentation that will support your self-assessment response. And as we go through this, we'll provide some examples on what that documentation could look like. It's important for me to stress that with a lot of these HCBS items that we're looking for, there is no black and white answer. We can't tell you, you need to come into compliance by doing this. Your setting is going to be so specific, and your members that you serve, we wouldn't be doing you any justice by saying in a person-centered way, do it this way, that's going to meet all your needs across the board. That's kind of against the HCBS rules. So while that is frustrating and hard to hear, I'm sure, I would like to plug that that's why we have the session 3 provider training. We'll talk about a little bit more, but it is upcoming. It's going to be peer-to-peer provider training so that you guys can talk amongst each other and work out some of these more difficult items and maybe come up with some creative solutions. Do you want to talk any more to that, Dara?
I think it's just noting that you do have flexibility. You do have flexibility based upon the people that you serve, where you serve them. These are standards, but we encourage you to be creative and have flexibility based upon, again, individuals you serve and where you serve them. So we don't want to be prescriptive at all, because then that limits your ability to have unique service models and other things. We want to support you to be innovative and creative while having a standard in place. And I think we'll learn a lot from each other as we continue to move forward. And we felt it was best that each of you talk with each other and share best practices to, again, support that provider flexibility versus the state coming in and telling you, you must do it this way.
Thank you. Another key point I want to stress is that you are going to answer these questions in general for your setting. These answers won't be based upon a member's specific needs or what a guardian wants or says. This is just in general, someone coming into your setting with no health and safety issues, no guardian issues. This is how you would answer, you know, yes or no. Is this applicable to this person with no issues at all? There's a whole person-centered planning process for the health and safety issues and guardian issues that a member may have. This, again, just very general about your setting and not specific to any member. So after the demographics part, we jump into these 2 key questions. You can see that they are bolded. That is because we feel that it is an indication of the setting that may need to be submitted for heightened scrutiny. These are the 2 questions about being co-located on the property or within an institutional setting. Answering yes to these does not mean you have failed. It just means that we may need to go on site ourselves or come up with some creative solutions on how you can become compliant with the HCBS rules.
Danielle, I'm just going to stop just momentarily just to make sure. We do have some Q&As regarding some of our terminology. So just want to level set so that folks can get the most information out of the session. So when we say health plan, we're talking in general about the managed care organizations, and that includes DDD, Banner, Mercy Care, and United for long-term care. So we use health plan is an interchangeable term with managed care organization, which does include DDD, and health plan member or Medicaid member, same thing. It's the all-text member that you're serving.
So I think that last question might have been for these two. So for our EPD plans, that's Banner, Mercy Care, United, they're going to coordinate amongst themselves to only give you one on-site visit if you work with all three health plans. It doesn't make any sense for you to have three, and that would be burdensome. So when that health plan contacts you to ask you to fill this out for their on-site visit, this is information that they'll want to have. They'll want to know how many members, let's say United, how many United members do you have, and then how many Medicaid members do you have? That's just information for their purposes.
And if you're a DDD provider, likely there's not going to be other members in that facility that are that aren't contracted or that aren't DD members. So thanks for the question, so we could clarify that understanding.
Some of these other general questions, again, these are point in time. We understand that they may change. They're just to get the health plan get a feel for your setting before they go out there. For our local area questions, is the setting or vehicles in the setting labeled or identified in a way that sets it apart from the surrounding residences or vehicles? This is not to get anyone in trouble. Let's say you are a big assisted living center, we would totally expect you to have signage. This is going to be really dependent on your setting. For example, we probably wouldn't expect to see signage on a small DD group home in the community. That might be a little abnormal. On my home, I don't have signage of all the conditions I have for my neighbors to see. So just, you know, it's really dependent on your type of setting. Again, no right or wrong answers to these, just to help us get an understanding of what you're setting. So now we'll jump into some of the more fun stuff. For our employment and volunteerism section, we have questions like, does the setting engage individuals of working or school age to see if they're interested in work and school? When individuals express an interest in employment, does the setting refer them for employment services? We don't expect residential settings to provide employment services, but we do expect them to assist their members in finding those services. Does the setting support individuals to have volunteer opportunities in the community? Does the setting support individuals to have employment opportunities in the community?
And Danielle, that's really not saying that in this case, the assisted living facility has to provide those opportunities, but it's ensuring that, and I think one of the things that we can probably back up and say too is that not all of these things are necessarily the provider's direct responsibility. It's a team effort, right? But does the setting support people that if I was an assisted living, or if I was a member living in an assisted living facility, would I be supported if I wanted to leave half the day to go out and volunteer down the street at the food bank? Would the assisted living support me in doing that, or help me find local volunteer resources to help me find an opportunity? If I needed some kind of supervision or personal care, then the team figures out how that can be provided so I can go ahead and do that thing that's really important to me.
Thank you, Deborah, that is important. see, we also have, does the setting support individuals to learn new skills or instruction for skill development that pertain to volunteer opportunities or paid employment? And do individuals have access to transportation to and from work or volunteering activities? That's another hot button issue. And as Sarah said, we don't expect the setting to provide transportation necessarily, just to assist the member in finding those transportation supports. You know, that could be anything. If they're volunteering at a church, it could be a church member, could be family, it could be transportation training. There's lots of different things out there, and we don't want to be too prescriptive on what you might come up with. Oh. Sorry, I'm trying to not juggle this around too much, but it's happening anyway. Our next section is community life. You can see we have some bolded items here. These are items we thought would be important to figure out if the setting is isolating to members in some way. Again, there's no wrong answer. It's just going to help us determine if your setting might need that heightened scrutiny review, and then help us figure out what technical assistance your setting might need as well. So for community life, for residential, we have, do individuals receive information about activities in the community? This could be a calendar of events. It could be people coming in to explain what's going on in the community, education, experiential learning. There's lots of different ways that this can be met.
And I think the point here that we're trying to make is that, does Sarah always say she wants to go bowling because that's the only thing she's ever been exposed to? And so she wants to get out and be engaged and meet people and do things? Or, you know, so sometimes, particularly if people have been living with a disability or for a long period of time, they may not have been exposed to things. So it's about giving people information and helping them learn, as Danielle said, that experiential learning to know, oh gosh, I might actually like to learn how to knit. I've never even thought about it because somebody came in and brought yarn and talked about it. So that's really what we're trying to get at here.
For our bolded heightened scrutiny questions, I hate to call them that, but it's really just an indicator for us. Do individuals have staff support to assist them in participating in activities in the community? Do individuals have informal supports to assist them in participating in activities in the community? Basically, if these members want to get out into the community, you know, and they need support, how is that team coming together to support that member and figure out who can offer that service? Do individuals have access to transportation, provider related or otherwise, to and from the setting for the purpose of engaging in community life? And I'll reiterate, doesn't have to be the provider giving the transportation. There's informal supports, family members, community members, lots of options out there on how we can get the member to participate in the community in the way that they see fit. Do individuals participate in activities in integrated settings? For example, religious, social, cultural, recreational, et cetera, compared to their peers, which would be people of similar age or people without disabilities. And this one is, again, really specific to your setting. It's really about, are these members able to do activities that are very normative for that community? So for rural areas, this might look a lot different than downtown Phoenix assisted living facilities. You know, what is the normal community interaction? Is it normal to have regularly scheduled trips to go into town? That was something we did when I was a kid living in a rural community. The big trip was, you know, to go into Casa Grande to Walmart once a month. So that would be totally normal. We don't expect an infrastructure of community activities to be built where one doesn't exist. We just want our members to have access to the community out there that does exist to them. And then the age group is another fun issue. So what is normative for that age group in the community to participate in? You know, are elderly people in the community going to a community center on Sundays? Or are they participating in a group to have a coloring activity? You know, what would be more normative for that age group and for those people to participate in? So that's something to think about, and it will be very specific to your setting. And the last one here, do individuals have regular opportunities for contact with people who don't live in the home and are not receiving services? Are there people coming in to provide training or participate in activities with your members? Are your members going out into the community to actually interact with people? You know, it's very normative, and for any of our lives, we don't just deal with one group of people. When I'm at work, I don't just deal with the people I work with. I have interaction with providers and members and everyone else, and you know, even the cafeteria people. There's just lots of opportunities for interaction. We want to make sure that everyone has this normative ability to interact with people who don't live in our homes or live or receive the same services that we do.
Yeah, is there a block party going on? If it's in a residential, you know, small assisted living group home and there's a block party, are people going to the block party if they're interested in that and getting exposed to meeting their neighbors and engaging with their community?
And some of these may seem like really hard to document as far as your response. So to give you some examples of what we would expect to see maybe for documentation, could be an individual's daily activities, maybe interviews with your members that show there's variation in scope and frequency of individual interactions and engagement within the community, copies of policies and procedures. That's going to be a big one for most of these. It could be a community calendar, a summary of community events. I'm sure a lot of you are doing this already, and it's just, you know, you're just going to have to think creatively on how we can show what you're doing to CMS. That's the bottom line. I apologize, my computer is not working with me. All right, so personal resources. This is a lot about members having assistance in managing their personal funds, getting to choose that person who assists them, deciding how they can spend their money. You know, whether it's going to Circle K to buy a soda, you know, if those are, I think, already in practice. Do individuals have personal bank accounts or another type of account? Do individuals have access to community purchased goods? And does the setting use interest or preference inventories to inform the provision of basic necessities for the member?
So this is like, let's say someone has dementia and, or maybe they're a person with a cognitive disability where communication is challenged, right? But how do we go about, let's just try to figure out, we've got money to spend for Dara to buy clothes, or to, you know, buy movies. We know she likes to watch movies, and we're challenged to figure out what exactly she might like. These are where some of those interviews with family members or other people who knew the person before maybe dementia had onset to help determine what might those preferences be if we're challenged to really identify what that might look like. I know, so we understand that people may not have the ability to have money and go to the store and purchase something. And so what are we doing in the most comprehensive way possible to figure out what that person might enjoy for their clothing, maybe if they had a favorite color or something like that, or maybe they used to dress very modestly, then maybe that would be that way, or maybe somebody was a little bit more colorful, like I am today, and, you know, like to wear more colorful clothes. So it's really just trying to figure out how do we determine what those preferences are to the best of our ability.
We'll move on to our payer source section. This is really just a quick question. Do all individuals living in the setting have the same access to activities, services, and amenities regardless of who pays for the service? So what we're trying to get at here is to make sure that members are not excluded from activities or amenities because of their Medicaid status, and that's independent of activity fees. So some of those amenities might be a pool, a salon, it could even be menu or food options. It's just important that our members are treated and given the same opportunities as non-Medicaid members. And let's see, home selection. Does the setting allow individuals to visit the setting prior to choosing to live there? I think we've done a lot in practice already. So just offering tours, maybe letting possible members share a meal or participate in an activity with the group, just to get a feel for the residents, see if that's somewhere they want to live. You know, that's really important that if they want that option, that it would be available to them. And to prove this, or for the documentation, it could even be something as simple as a sign-in sheet showing that other people can come into that setting and interact with the members as they need to. We also have, does the setting use interest and preference inventories or individuals' personal goals and risk assessments to inform decisions to ensure the member is accommodated in the least restrictive manner? So again, that's for those members that may have a memory issue or a cognitive impairment, that may not be able to speak to their needs, but we want to make sure we're serving them in the best manner possible, with as few restrictions as possible.
So one example is, this is a couple of years ago, someone explained to me that in an assisted living center, there were activities given to people that simulated what they used to do and used to enjoy, like a woman who used to be a homemaker, and so they gave her laundry and she folded it and put it away and had places to sort of do that as to keep busy during the day. Somebody else was, I don't know, an accountant or something, that business person, and so they set up an office and a desk, and that person did that activity throughout the day as they felt, and they enjoyed it, and it was something comfortable to them and something that was resonant of their life previously. So that's one way to accommodate somebody who, and keeping them busy during the day that's specific to their individual needs and interests.
Private room, this question is only on the ETD residential self-assessment. Do individuals have an option for a private room if they're able to afford it? For those of you who may not have private rooms available, that can just be documented in your response. I don't think we need to spend any more time on that. For the MCO, person-centered service plan portion. So this is specific to how the setting is going to support the person-centered planning process and participate in those planning team meetings. You'll start seeing these person-centered planning team meetings start being scheduled after June of this year. The case managers are going to be going through training this month and next month on the tool and how they're going to implement this. So it's not something you're going to see right now, but it will be shortly on the horizon. So we expect the setting to provide support so that members can participate in these person-centered service plan meetings. You know, they're going to be scheduled by the case manager, and it's just important that the members can attend if things need to be moved around, or maybe they need an early lunch. You know, what is the setting doing to make sure that those members can make it to their meetings? And does the setting participate in the person-centered service plan meetings? So this will be something new for you guys. we're hoping that during the person-centered service plan meeting that'll be held by the case manager, that you can attend and also complete your facility service plan that we know is a requirement. So, you know, maybe we can combine these two meetings with the member there so you guys can both hear their preferences and choices and needs.
Because what inevitably happens when that collaboration doesn't occur is that there's conversations about the member without the member. Or people are relaying information that the member said in one place, and it's good for the member to be empowered to be able to communicate, or as part of their person-centered plan with both the facility that provides their care along with their case manager. So again, a lot of these have to do with member engagement and empowerment as well.
Does the setting support a discussion with the member regarding key indicators that help assess an individual's integration experience? So just coming prepared to those meetings with the opportunities they have to interact with the broader community, what choices they already make or want to make. Because this will be a person-centered planning team that you'll be a part of. So where you need to find those informal supports, this will be the team that could help you find those for that member. Does the setting help to identify health and safety risks that necessitate restrictions in a risk management plan? We kind of touched on this. So for members that may need restrictions to these rights because of health and safety issues, these person-centered planning meetings are where that would happen with the member's involvement. Does the setting help to identify personal goal setting opportunities to support integration? And does the setting routinely engage in customer satisfaction exercises to ensure staff is supporting individuals to meet their goals? And we, again, are not mandating how any of this is done. This could be an actual customer satisfaction survey sent to your members, or having conversations with your members, or even an anonymous comment box. There's lots of different options on how these can be met.
This could also, I know in the assisted living, I believe as part of your licensing rules, have to have like a member council or member group that you connect with to help, plan activities and things like that. It can even be something like that. And since I said licensing, I think it's probably important to say, when it comes to assisted living licensing, the HCBS rules are over and above what your license requirements are. So just like the health plans today don't monitor for licensing requirements, they monitor for quality of care standards and specific requirements of the Medicaid program. You're still going to have your license monitoring visits, and these are things that's over and above. But as you can tell, certainly complements a lot of what is required from a licensing perspective. So it's really creating more direct standards around a lot of things that are already, you're obligated to do under licensure.
We'll move on. So we also have the setting plan of care / service plan. These are taken from the current assessment, so something already in process for EPD residential settings. Are the plans of care service plans completed within 14 days? Are they reviewed within appropriate timeframes according to Arizona state statute? Does the setting provide supports to make sure the individual understands their plan of care? And then we have another, this one is newer, this is for the HCBS rules. Does the setting utilize detailed interest and preference inventories completed with the input of the individual and others who know their life history, including past work history, hobbies, and community engagement, to inform decisions on personal goals related to activities both internal and external to the setting? And these people who would be engaged would probably be part of that person-centered planning team at that person-centered meeting to help advocate for their member and what their goals and needs may be. So we'll move on to individual rights. Do individuals receive personal care assistance in private? Do individuals receive information about their rights in plain language? Does the setting post information about member rights in plain language? Does the setting provide supports to ensure that individual understands their rights? Do individuals know who to contact if they have concerns or complaints? Do they have access to telephone and or computer for personal use in a location that has a space to ensure privacy? And do individuals have protections against restrictive measures, including isolation and chemical, pharmacological, and physical restraint? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but you're just going to answer this again for all members, not specific members, and how the setting supports individuals to know and understand their rights and their options if they have concerns or complaints.
So documentation in that instance, Danielle, would be something like, does the setting post information about member rights in plain language? We should, through the observational component of the review, be able to see that material, or you would share that material with the health plan who's ever coming to monitor to show that, yes, you have that information available.
So our next section is one of our fun ones. Again, you'll see those bolded items. We talked about this a little bit in the last session, so we'll go into a little bit more detail here for independent. Do individuals have access to a key or code to the front door entrance of their home or setting? So this is, again, answering for all your members, and really based on a member with no health or safety needs or guardian issues. We understand that there's going to be individual health and safety restrictions, and that will be handled through the person-centered planning process. So I know it's hard to maintain that mind frame when you're going through this, but this is for that member that has no health, safety, or guardian issues. Are members given the choice and opportunity to freely exit the facility, free from curfew or other requirements for a scheduled return home? We have to keep in mind these, for the most part, are adults and this is their home. I can come and go from my home at any time. If I want a Coke at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can go to Circle K and get one. There's no one that would stop me because I don't have any health and safety concerns. Do individuals get to make informed decisions about what they want to do every day, including scheduling changes? And this one and the one below it are a little bit similar. The first one is, do individuals get to make those decisions? And do individuals receive support to make those decisions? You know, some members may not even know that they have the option to make decisions about scheduling changes. They may just look at a community calendar of events and think that they have to attend. And I won't pretend that this part will be easy, but just because if I lived in a assisted living facility, if the whole group was going to Walmart Friday night, but I didn't want to, there should be some way to work that out. And again, I know it's not easy because CMS is not providing additional funding for HCBS services, but there should be some creative solutions that I hope these settings can come up with. You know, whether it's just scheduling those trips to Walmart at a time when someone can be there, or again, not completely on the setting, so tapping into those friends and family supports to see if they can assist with the situation. It's going to take some creative decisions, but I'm sure we'll all get there.
I think this is one example of something that'll be really critical during the Part 3 training sessions around the peer-to-peer discussion about how do we do this? We have so many resources, we have so many staff, you know, we have, you know, so how are folks doing that? And some of it can be negotiation, right? Well, you know, and some of it can be accommodating the request or a combination of both. So this will be one of those things that we'll be getting some of those best practices to share with each other.
And I will like to say, you know, we hear a lot, trust me, I hear a lot of feedback about these. And I just have to remind everyone that we're looking at this from a person without any of those health and safety issues, without the guardian issues. So this is a grown adult living in their residential home, who should have access to these. I mean, how would you yourself, what rights and choices would you want to be able to make in your own home? That's really the way to look at it. So we'll move forward. We have another one here about transportation. Do individuals have access to transportation training if they are currently unable to use public transportation? And then here we get into some really fun ones. Do individuals have full access to the kitchen at any time? This does include the stove. That's been a question. Again, I know this is, you know, going to be hard for people, but this is members without health and safety restrictions. Someone who, you know, has full right to use a stove in their home. Do individuals have access to the laundry areas at any time? I personally don't like other people doing my laundry, so I would never let my husband or children touch my laundry. So we want to make sure that if you have a member that feels the same way, are they able to access that laundry area? And do individuals have full access to shared living spaces at any time? This is like living rooms, family rooms, you know, anywhere that your members are going to congregate. And it could mean watching the TV at 3 a.m. in the morning at a peaceful decibel that doesn't, you know, affect any other people who are living in the home. I think a lot of these are, I want to say they're doable within your setting. It's going to take a lot of creative conversations, a lot of hard conversations. We definitely don't want someone's rights to interfere on others. I know if I cranked the TV up at 3 a.m. in the morning, I would have everyone in my house yelling at me. So just, it is going to be difficult, and I won't pretend it's not, but we'll plug that session 3 again for some of that creative solution. We'll move on to choice. Do individuals have the option to make requests for an alternate staff member to assist them? Again, something not entirely easy. We understand your staffing constraints. So if I were a member and it was important to me to only have females interact with me, we would hope that the setting would work on a plan to eventually make that happen once you can, given your staffing constraints.
Or another example would be, I really like Danielle. We have a lot in common. We're from the same area or something. Danielle's the caregiver, but Danielle, works a different shift. Maybe she works overnight, and I need someone, during the day to assist with personal care needs. But once Danielle was able to work days, or if she transitioned to days, could she be the person that supports me? Would be a good example.
And so the second one, are those requests for alternate staff members honored when the setting can accommodate? Are individuals freely, I see a change I already have to make, freely able to make requests for changes in the way their services and supports are delivered? Do you have a good example for that one? I'm trying to think of one.
There may just be, this could be something around, this could be accommodations for food preferences. This could be maybe I have a particular need that's unique to me as far as showering or something. I have a preference. Those kinds of things, that would be, my guess are those things that are already accommodated, but that would be an example of a couple of ideas.
And do individuals get to choose their roommates? And again, we know people living in your home may have a roommate request that cannot be accommodated immediately, just given the size of your setting and having to move other people around who are now impacted by that member's choice. So these are, Can someone choose their roommate, and will the setting work with them to eventually accommodate that request?
Interpreter wants to just interject. Is the meeting is 1 hour or 2 hours or?
2 hours.
Okay, because I'm supposed to have a team for a 2-hour meeting, and I've been going for an hour. And there was something that happened this morning too. I was supposed to have a team. It was a 2-hour meeting, and I was alone. And so I just this morning did 2 hours of interpreting, and so this day is like really strange. So I don't know if the request was wrong, but I just emailed my agency, said, no, did it need a team? It's
Okay.
a 2-hour meeting.
2 hour, it's a 1 to 3.
Is there going to be a break? Can there be a break in here?
It's a webinar, so we don't.
Webinar, I see.
Excuse us, we're addressing logistics here in the meeting room.
I need a second.
Okay, so.
Hold on 1 second.
We're going to move on just a little bit. We'll go to residency agreements. Again, this is something only for the EPD residential assisted living centers. We are still working this out with CDD internally to figure out how to accommodate this as a part of the HCBS rules. And for our assisted living centers, and this is something that's pretty much already in place. Do individuals or representatives have a written agreement in place providing protections to address the termination of a residency agreement and due process and appeals? Does the setting use the standard access residency agreement that is in plain language? That is already created and in policy and already implemented for quite a while now. And does the setting provide supports to ensure that the individual understands their residency agreement? And we'll move on to privacy, which is another hot button issue. So just a reminder, this is for members that don't have those health and safety restrictions or guardian issues. Do individuals have access to a key to their bedroom or unit? Do individuals have lockable bedroom unit doors? And do individuals have lockable bathroom doors? Do staff and other people knock to receive permission before entering an individual's bedroom or bathroom? Do individuals have the opportunity to consider other roommate options if they want to change roommates? Are individuals allowed to decorate their own room, including moving furniture and hanging up items on the wall? I think that one's already in practice. We're just adding it to an assessment. Are individuals consulted on decor for common areas? And we don't expect settings to redecorate every time there's a new member. This is just if a setting were happening to go through a redecoration process for a living room or something, would those members who actually live there be consulted on some of that decor? Does the setting have a process to help individuals make choices for roommates? And does the setting have a process to assess roommate satisfaction? Again, the roommate issue is if it's applicable, if all of your members have rooms without roommates, you wouldn't have to worry about a lot of this, but for those ones that do have roommates, it's important to know that we're helping members make those decisions about roommates and assessing roommate satisfaction. We'll move on. Well, please bear with me. This thing just took me all the way back to the beginning. Okay. I apologize. So we're on to dining. Do individuals have a choice on what to eat if they don't like what is being served? This doesn't mean that we expect you to operate like a kitchen in a restaurant.
Like a diner,
Yeah.
you can come in at any time.
But if I were a member in your home and say I didn't like what is being served, would I have the option to maybe fix myself a peanut butter sandwich or a bowl of cereal or something else that I've bought for myself? So kind of think of it from that perspective. Do individuals have a choice in what time they eat? So if let's say I have my person-centered planning meeting and it's going to run during dinner. Can I choose to eat before or after, and how could that be accommodated? And again, it doesn't mean it has to be a full 4-course meal. Just how will the setting work with me to accommodate that? Do individuals have a choice with whom to eat? Do individuals have a choice of eating alone? Do individuals have access to food, snacks, or drinks? And again, the provider would not have to supply the food, snacks, well, the snacks and drinks, but do members, if they buy snacks and drinks, have access to the stuff they've purchased? And do individuals have the opportunity to purchase their own food, snacks, and drinks? Again, at the setting, you don't have to operate a small store, but can members go out to Circle K, or when they go out to Walmart, can they purchase the food and snacks that they want? We'll move on to visitors. This is another fun one. Are individuals free from restrictions, like visiting hours, when they can have family and friends over to visit? So because these are members, and for the purposes of this, they are free from health and safety restrictions. If they wanted to have a visitor over, past midnight or early in the morning, are they allowed that option? We want to make sure that settings are not telling people in their own homes that they can only have visitors over from 2 to 3 on Fridays. It's important that members can see the people in their lives when they need to see them. If, let's say, in a small assisted living center, members came up with their own housemate rules without provider involvement, that could be allowable, but the key point is that there's no provider involvement. These would have to be members coming up with these decisions on their own to create a more cohesive living environment, and that's completely normative. I think we've all had roommates, and at some point I'm sure we've all had to make roommate rules or housemate rules when things have not gone well. And does the setting have areas or furniture in the home that supports individuals to actually meet with their family and friends in private? And this doesn't have to be like a conference room. This could be some benches outside if they wanted to meet outside in private, or
some little like mini living room areas or something like that, that would foster that kind of private communication. I'm going to be mindful of time. We have a lot of good questions.
So we're moving on to accessibility. I would like to note that this is not ADA accessibility. This is accessibility to the people that live in the home. So is the setting accessible for people to safely and freely move around the home, including entering and exiting the setting? These are all going to be very specific to the members that you're serving and what their needs are with accessibility. Do individuals have physical accessibility to appliances and furniture? Does the setting have resources for assessing and providing individualized modifications if necessary based on individual specific needs? And is the home free from barriers preventing individuals from entering or exiting common rooms or member rooms or sleeping areas? Those barriers could be anything from baby gates, just blocking a room or locking a door to an otherwise accessible area. And again, it's not, we don't expect every setting to become in compliance with the ADA specifications in general. This is for people living in that home and what their needs are for accessibility. And our last section for this tool is specific to memory care settings. So if you are just an assisted living facility that doesn't have any memory care members, you wouldn't have to worry about this section. We'll go through here. Does the setting utilize environmental design to accommodate individuals' risk for wandering or exit-seeking behaviors in an effort to maximize individual initiative, autonomy, and independence?
So one example would be, there's lots of innovative ways, and I'm sure many of you can speak to this better than Danielle or I can, but for example, you could have, I've heard that having black mats in front of areas that might go out to the, to the outside or whatever are things that sometimes deter people who have dementia. Or there's all kinds of different science around different things you can do. Maybe you do have a door, but maybe it's not like a bolted steel door. Maybe it's a door with a window so that people can look outside. Like just some of those kind of unique, creative ways that, yes, you can, particularly for those people who have health and safety risks for wandering, but still give them as much of a normative experience and being able to experience both inside and outside. So we're really looking for some creativity there, or maybe some ropes and things to maybe help guide people where the appropriate areas are versus gates and things of that nature.
And the last four are specific to staff training and having staff demonstrate their competencies in these areas. Understanding underlying conditions, diseases, and disorders that may lead to that wandering or exit-seeking behavior. I am no expert, but I have heard for some of these memory care members, they can't vocalize when they have an infection or pain or something that may not be visible to the eye, but it would result in some of those behaviors that around exit-seeking. Observing individuals for the purposes of identifying through observation patterns, frequency, and triggers the root causes for that wandering and exit-seeking behavior. Employing less restrictive interventions to maximize an individual's initiative on autonomy and independence. Again, we don't want the first intervention to be, locked metal doors and that institutional environment if we can prevent it in any way. Assessment of the individual's communication style, verbal and nonverbal, and their needs in order to support staff to interpret nonverbal cues, body language, and behavioral changes, and learn to anticipate the member's needs to ensure staff support optimizes each member's life experience by affording them the opportunities to make decisions to the greatest extent possible. We had touched on this before, but being nonverbal or having cognitive impairment doesn't mean that members' needs and preferences can't be determined through some other methods. So thank you for sticking with me through the residential assessment tool. I know it's a lot. The other two will be a lot easier. We're not going to go through them line by line like we did with this one. Obviously, a lot of, we're going to go through the day program and the employment tool separately. Of course, a lot of the roommate questions and residential specific questions have been removed. So we're just going to go through what's different, what's been added that you'll have to pay attention to for those settings. So we'll start with the day program. If you remember, we have these same two questions on the residential tool, but for day program, we added, is the program located in a general community where people access the services or go to work?
Versus is the program like isolated somewhere on its own island somewhere, if you will, and away from just normal day-to-day activities in the community.
This one in employment is purple because it's specific to this day program tool and the employment tool. Do individuals have access to transportation to and from work or volunteering activities? Very similar to the one in residential, just specific to work and volunteer activities. And again, the setting would not have to provide that transportation, but work with the member in finding those transportation support. For community life, do individuals interact with the general public either through visitation to the program and or activities in the general community? So for day program, this could be people coming in to, again, maybe lead an activity, lead a teaching session, or the members going out into the community for activities and events. And are individuals learning and engaging in activities in the community comparable with peers? Similar to the one in residential, so we just want to make sure that people are engaged in activities and community involvement in a way that's appropriate for their age group and peer level. And it's going to look very different based on the members that you serve. And under personal resources, we have, do individuals have access to money management, habilitation, or rehabilitation skill building training? My understanding that's something that happens already in the day program.
So again, it's another support to help them manage their personal resources to whatever extent. And if they have a desire to manage them to a greater extent, then is the program supporting them to learn how to do what they need to do to manage it to whatever the extent is possible for them.
So for program selection for the day program tool and the employment tool, do you allow individuals to visit the program prior to choosing to receive services there? Similar to the residential, can people take a tour? Can they do a meet and greet, participate in an activity? You know, just something to get a feel for the setting and if they would decide if they would be a good fit for it or not. And under independence, these are specific to the day program. Are individuals given the choice and opportunity to freely come and go from the setting? Similar to the residential, I know this can pose some issues with billing and other issues that we've heard. These are active conversations that are happening, but it's important that members, how do I want to put this?
Well, yeah, I think it's just important, just like you or I might choose to go to an activity and then, you know, maybe change our minds midday or something. I'm not interested in being here the rest of the day. Those kinds of things. Danielle makes a great point, and there are some questions about this as well regarding staffing ratios and how this impacts the provider to be able to be billed. And that's really kind of the next phase that we move into after we start the monitoring, is looking at how is the billing or the scopes of service within the contracts or policy somehow disincentivizing these things to happen. And so we need to look at those things. So you guys are raising good practical questions, but I think just from a general sense, it's really, again, allowing people to change their minds. And somebody made a good point in the Q&A around, well, if the person's regularly deciding not to come or leaving half day, well, then maybe it's not the right fit for them, right? So that's a great point. Then the team needs to discuss. Maybe the day program is not the place, or the adult day health program is something they're interested in. Maybe that's an indication that we need to look at something else.
Thank you. So a couple more specific to the day program. Do individuals in the same setting have alternate schedules for services and activities? You know, again, just depending on what the activity is there an option to do something else if that person doesn't want to participate in the activity that's scheduled? Can individuals, another one I have to fix, can individuals schedule activities at their own convenience? And we understand, given the staffing requirements, this may not happen the same day that they ask for it, but can the setting work to kind of figure out when this activity might be able to happen within the day's program? Can individuals engage in activities that are specific to their skills, abilities, desires, needs, and preferences, including engaging in activities with people of their own choosing and in areas of their own choosing? So within the day program, if a small group of members wants to get together and work on a puzzle or play a board game or
eat a snack outside in the with the picnic tables, can they do that?
Yeah. That might be it. So for day program, a lot of these are going to be similar to what's in the residential, with the roommate and all that stuff removed. Those are the ones that are really specific to the day program that I wanted to go over. And we'll jump to the employment self-assessment now. Again, it has the two questions that we've seen in the residential and day program. And is the program located in the general community where people access services or go to work? So since this is an employment program, is it located somewhere where people could actually get a job and work? Is it out in rural Arizona with no one around it? Just.
Or is it like in an industrial complex, which is a normative environment, right, for people to work in, but is it like isolated in the back 40, where if you pull up to the place, you're not connected to, you may not interact with anybody who might be coming to work at the place next door? Sometimes industrial complexes have lunch or restaurants in them, right, for people to engage in. So are the folks able to engage, go get their lunch down at the restaurant, those kinds of things.
So for employment specifically, do individuals either employed or preparing for employment routinely interact with the general public through visitation to the program and or activities in the general community? So this could be people coming to the setting to provide employment training. This could be the members of the employment setting going out into the community to provide goods, to sell goods like at a farmer's market or something. Lots of different ways that these settings can try to be integrated within their community. Do individuals have benefits to the same extent as individuals not receiving Medicaid, including negotiating work schedules, breaks and lunch, and if applicable, vacation, medical leave, or medical benefits? We know the latter probably won't be seen much, but it's important that in any work environment, if I needed to flex my time for a day or I was sick and couldn't come in, those are things I can work out with my boss. If I have to take a break a little bit early or a little bit late to make an appointment or make a phone call, those are all normative things that would happen in any employment environment. And I should be specific because I didn't say it up front and I apologize. This is not for community integrated employment. This is specific to center-based employment and group-supported employment settings. Let's see. Do individuals either employed or preparing for employment have access to all areas of a workplace to the same extent as their non-disabled peers? This doesn't mean free reign to every place in a workplace. For example, I have a badge, I can get in and out of certain areas, and other areas I don't have access to, and that's normative and expected. But it would be really odd if, let's say Adam is my peer here, if he could get into a restricted area that I couldn't, because we do the same thing for all intents and purposes.
Right, but I'm a person with a disability. For some reason, I'm considered more of like a security risk or something
Yeah.
accessing that environment.
Or they wouldn't allow either one of us in the cafeteria.
Yes.
Right.
Let's see, where are we at? Do individuals either employed or preparing for employment have job tasks that non-disabled peer would perform for pay? Are these members really learning job skills that they can use anywhere else? Adam, do you want to speak? No? Okay.
No, it's okay.
So is what they're doing something that is, if I wasn't in a center-based environment, somebody else is doing that job somewhere and getting paid to do it?
Yeah.
Versus like, and I'm really not trying to be disrespectful or demeaning to anybody, but, you know, I don't know, I'm putting together, gluing the matchsticks together and I'm getting paid a piece rate because I put so many together in an hour or whatever. But like, you know, so, but is it, or maybe it's a part of a task, right? Doesn't mean people are completing the whole task, but part of the task that they're doing, does it lead up to a task that would, a person without a disability would get paid to do?
Thank you. And last one here, do employment individuals have equal opportunities to engage in company activities like potlucks or parties or professional development? So if let's say the office or workplace that they work in or attend has a potluck, would they not be invited for some reason? Because that would not be normal. If we have a potluck here, everyone's invited, and people show up who are, you know, aren't even on the email. We just have random people coming in, and that's okay and that's acceptable. So just things like that. We want to make sure our members are not left out of anything that would otherwise be normative.
And things like clubs like Toastmasters or something else that's provided in the environment, are the individuals given opportunity to participate in those things?
So we will move down to personal resources. Is pay for work rendered directly to the individual or their representative? Pretty self-explanatory. Are individuals either employed or preparing for employment or their representative provided with information about how benefits are affected by employment income? This is not something, an education we expect the setting to provide right now, but we would expect that they would refer for that DB 101 training or other training that would help them understand how their income affects their benefits.
And each of the health plans have employment staff that can help direct anyone toward this type of benefit type counseling. You know, like Danielle said, Disability Benefits 101 or DB 101 is one of those.
Thank you, Adam. So we'll move on to person-centered service plan. This is where it gets a little bit different for employment. So our routine discussions occurring regarding progressive movement towards community integrated employment. Do individuals receiving new employment services after March of 2022 have community integrated employment goals? This is in our state transition plan that, is it CBE or GSE? Which one's going away?
Oh, CBE.
That
going away.
center-based employment will move to a more integrated model, and that those members who receive the service after March of 2022 will be required to have an employment goal to move to community integrated employment. So you can read more about that in our state transition plan on the website.
So just to add on to what Danielle was saying, and I think this will probably be covered quite a bit in the peer-to-peer training for the employment programs, but center-based employment will transition into a pre-vocational, but those folks who are currently receiving the service can stay there, can basically stay in a pre-vocational service without having a goal to move out. But of course, we would want the programs to always encourage that and support that. But it's a way to support members who've been in long-term center-based employment for whom it would be a major disruption to force them out of that setting. But new people coming in would have a different experience with the program.
Thank you, Dara. And that kind of ties into our next one. For individuals in CBE programming prior to March 2022, are efforts being made to progress them towards competitive integrated employment. So they don't have to have that goal, but we would still want the conversation with the planning team to take place to make sure that the member can progress that way if they choose to. And we'll move on to independence. Do individuals have the ability to request alternate working schedules consistent with customary employment practices? So this is kind of evolved for employment from being able to request different activities in the residential and day program settings. But we would expect that individuals will be able to work with their supervisors or whoever they're working with at the employment settings to work out alternative schedules, just like anyone else can do with some give and take.
And just like Dara mentioned in the beginning about how, think about the word normative, what's normal for anyone. We understand that in this employment area right here, what's normal for, what's a customary employment practice, not giving someone the all-out rights for everything, but what do we all do in our day-to-day. So always remember that customary employment practices.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean that the person can just go to work and just leave in the middle of the day because they're asserting their right to be independent. Well, they can do that, but they will get fired.
Exactly, right.
So part of in working with members to have a normative life experience is to also hold them accountable just as you would hold anybody else accountable for that. So there have been some questions about that as well. So we recognize that, absolutely.
Under visitors, this had more to do with visiting hours for residential. For employment, it has evolved to are individuals free from restrictions on having friends and family visit during breaks and lunch, following the workplace settings, customary visitation practices. We understand this is very specific to the work that might be occurring. I work in an office. My husband can come visit me during lunch if he wants, and no one has any qualms about that. Of course, if I were out
on a construction crew,
right?
Yeah.
Probably a little less likely,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So that's where we have that customary visitation practices for the workplace setting, because that's going to be very dependent on that setting. Oh, and that is the end of our full review. So let me go back to the PowerPoint because we have some more information for you. So just again, in summary, the tools we just went over are part of the new annual assessment process. There's no wrong or right answers. We're just trying to gauge your compliance so we can make sure that you are compliant by March of 2022. And the providers, so you guys will complete that self-assessment prior to the health plan's on-site visit. And I'll be honest, the more information and detail you can provide, the better you will be off for getting the technical assistance that you actually need and for getting the health plan moving through your setting as quickly as possible.
And probably just a point of clarification, although we've made these tools available to you, as Danielle said, we noted some minor changes that need to be made. The health plan, so DDD or one of the EPD health plans, will, as part of their notice for, hey, we're coming out to do our quality monitoring visit, will include the tool in that. So, I mean, we would certainly encourage you to take the tool and maybe fill it out today as you would and just kind of get an idea of where you're at. But in a formal sense, you will get the tool ahead of time before the monitoring visit and complete it, because certainly things can change from year to year.
Thank you. Again, we do have that upcoming session 3 training. It has not been scheduled yet. So you cannot register yet. We are working on that, but it will be peer-to-peer setting-specific workshops. That will be specific to DD residential, EPD assisted living, day programs, and employment programs. Those will begin in March and April. So just keep an ear out for more information about those training programs. We'll be sending out information as soon as you can register. You want to talk about?
Sure. So we'll get to the Q&A in just a second. And one of the questions that I want to address related to the Q&A is that we'll do our best to try to answer some of them today with the remaining time we have available, but we're also collecting these questions and we're using them to help sort of craft the conversations for these, for those session 3s or the part 3 sessions. So just know, and you guys are asking great questions, so well, we appreciate you taking the time to submit them. We recognize that to transition your business practices and kind of get used to these new standards, there's a level of effort needed to do that. So we did include in a proposal and have a proposal currently that we're considering to provide a differential adjusted payment for you all providers who participate in the training and also complete a pre-screening survey, which will be a small survey that Danielle's been working on, which is reminiscent of some of the questions that she's reviewed today. There'll be a public notice about that differential payment going out at the end of this month. And so what this means is that if we access, finalize this and decide to do this, that those providers who meet some of these qualifications, like participating in the training and completing the pre-screening survey, will have an increased rate percentage applied to their rates for these services. So we want to, again, that hasn't been finalized yet, but we're just putting you on notice. And this is part of our effort to help support you as you engage in this sort of increased level of effort to get your programs and your settings to comply.
And we wanted to offer some more information. Our state transition plan is on the website right now. We plan a website update with the recording of this session, and session 1's re-recording will be uploaded to the website as well very soon. Please sign up for our constant contact email list under the Stay Informed tab on that website to make sure that you receive notification about those session 3 trainings that will be upcoming, and any information we have to release about website updates and the DAP. For questions, you can send them to hcbs@azaccess.gov. That goes directly to myself and Dara. You know, I won't promise that we can provide individual one-on-one technical assistance, but we will do our very best to answer your questions as they come in. And as Dara said, we're also using the Q&A from this session, and we'll use Q&A that comes into that inbox to help inform those session 3 peer-to-peer training sessions.
So with our remaining time, Danielle, can we move to the Q&A? So just to help with time, I think we'll still keep everybody muted, but we'll look at the questions that are in the, that folks submitted. And I won't read them word for word, but we are collecting them. So Danielle, people are still kind of struggling with the idea that talking about this level of independence and integration with the understanding that the reason why people are in these settings is because their ability to maybe self-care or make decisions and things like that are compromised by the nature of their disability or their aging. So maybe it would be helpful for us to kind of just talk again about sort of the intent and sort of the challenge to all of us around kind of how we need to rethink about this.
Absolutely. So I won't juggle through the slides for that, but so the intent of the HCBS rules, and this is coming out from CMS, is to make sure that these members have a right to choice in their lives and a right to integrate within their community in the way that they want. This is to avoid some access in Arizona. We've been lucky that we've all pretty much always served members in the most least restrictive way that we could. I know it sounds scary, but it's going to be a lot of creative solutions. It's really about providing choice. That doesn't mean that in a home of 10 people, they all get to do whatever they want, because I can't even facilitate that in my own home. So it's just going to be some of those creative solutions, and I won't promise to have an answer, but those session 3 sessions are really going to help And then for those people that do have those health and safety needs, that do need rights restrictions because we don't want them to hurt themselves or anyone else, that's where that person-centered planning process comes into place. So as the setting and the provider, you will be part of that person-centered planning team to talk about that member's risk, to talk about possible restrictions. And, you know, not all the restrictions are going to last a lifetime. We're going to want to work with these members because they are people who have rights, and figure out how we can move them to a less restrictive
experience.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, we use examples like being able to go out to Circle K at 2 a.m. and things like that. We're not saying that everybody gets to go out at 2 a.m. to go to Circle K. What we're saying is that's an example. For me, I love Coke, and if you were to deprive me of getting Coke at any point in the day, I would have an issue, right? So it just depends on what's meaningful to that person. And so that's really where it gets to the individualized support. But if there was something that's really important to that person, how are we priming the settings that are providing the services to be able to support that person to do what's meaningful to them? So it doesn't mean if you serve children, we're saying children can go out at 2 a.m. to get a Coke. That's an example. We're just trying to get you all to kind of think a little bit about what those would be. And we would encourage you to start thinking about the people you're serving and start thinking about, oh yeah, Adam, we know that he enjoys baseball games for spring training. Let's try to think ahead about this year and supporting how we can figure out we can get to a couple spring training games. And that's really true, by the way. Adam does really enjoy that. So we're just trying to get you to kind of think about what that means. And you know the people best that you serve. And so, but we are challenging you, as Danielle talked about the culture shift. Okay, moving on here to some additional questions. Documentation. I think Danielle covered that. You will need to, as part of your self-assessment, provide documentation. It could be policies and procedures, it could be a brochure you have, it could be things you have on your walls, it could be training materials for people that work in the program, that whatever would be sort of documentable, if you will. I think I just made up a new word, to demonstrate that yes, you have a setting that affords people these opportunities, and you're making an effort to allow for this integration. So talking about the guardian challenge, right? So that is a challenge, and I would say to you that this is one of those things, as Danielle's talked about, doesn't have an easy answer. And again, these would be things that we would expect to be as part of the peer-to-peer discussions. But part of this effort is that members and families also have to challenge themselves as well. And we're working on developing materials that are going to kind of help set that expectation, and also work with family groups to help us develop materials for families, so that can be a peer-to-peer discussion as well. But just because someone has a guardian and that guardian doesn't want to limit or wants to limit them in some way, there's going to need to be some real frank discussions as part of person-centered planning about what's really risk involved versus what's preference for the guardian versus what the member wants. Just because someone's under guardianship doesn't mean that they're not a human being and they don't have preferences. So you all deal with challenging issues like that today, and the kind of strategies you use today to work through that would be what we would expect as well. So good questions about that. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through here. So a lot of questions about liability. And again, this doesn't have an easy answer response. I think this is something that can also be discussed in the peer-to-peer groups, and maybe we can get more details about that and see what we can take a look at as far as a future Q&A on that. But that is a concern, but also it's a team effort. The member and the family are agreeing to these things, right? So it's not a sole responsibility on the provider or liability on the provider. But those would be specific questions that if you have specific scenarios or examples of your concerns around that, or what you mean, is it your insurance carrier, or you think it's the state holding you liable for these things, those would be good examples of things to share with us through the email, because that'll help us better understand what it is that you're specifically talking about. But good question that you all are raising. Just going through here. A question about members who struggle with weight issues or boundary issues. So this is where we get into the person-centered plan. So if I'm somebody who has Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a syndrome that I feel famished all the time, I'm never satisfied by eating, right? So that's a fundamental human need, and you're gonna do whatever you need to do, right, to get food. So in some cases, so an example might be where that person lives in a group home. So we've talked about this before, and somebody said, well, maybe we should have everybody with Prader-Willi in the same group home. Not the answer. The answer is Dara lives in a group home with 4 other people. Maybe there is a lock on the refrigerator because Dara can't have access to the refrigerator at any time, all time, but maybe my roommates and housemates have a key to the lock, right? I mean, it's an example. Certainly we don't understand the circumstances on which you provide care, but that's a way to be creative about. And certainly if I had Prader-Willi syndrome, hopefully you're working with me on skill building about, even despite my disability, helping me learn how to navigate that world of food and access to food. And those are things that are documented in the person-centered plan. So regarding the scoring on the tool, there's some questions about that, Danielle. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about what the scoring means and sort of how the health plan will use that tool in concert with the other tools to kind of help assess where providers are?
Absolutely. So the scoring on the self-assessment tool is just a gauge for the health plan to figure out, like I said, how compliant you are for the HCBS rules. You know, so in the most simplest terms, the more points you have, the more compliant you are. There's no pass or fail metric around it. It's just going to help us determine which settings might need that heightened scrutiny review or some really targeted technical assistance to make sure they can get into compliance by March of 2022. And again, in addition to that provider self-assessment that the health plan will be validating, they're also going to do member interviews, observations, and community interviews that are going to help support your self-assessment responses and support your overall compliance level. So it's a whole tool suite, and it's just to help the health plan determine what technical assistance you need. So even just the one score off the self-assessment is not the entire picture of your setting.
And you will as a provider, when the health plan goes out to assess, and we're looking at you getting at least 2, maybe 3 visits between now and the end of March 2022, you will get like a corrective action plan after the assessment that says, here are the things where we said that you need help. But as Danielle's been talking about it, it's not meaning like, here's your corrective action plan, see you bye later, or that we're disappointed in you. It's that here's your plan of what you need to work on before we come out the next year. And then we're going to have ongoing training. So Danielle and I are going to be looking at the reports that come in from the health plans to look at themes of where people are struggling. And then we're going to build in training and technical assistance around that. So it's not, it is a negative in the sense that you have a weakness, but it's it's all of our responsibility to help support the provider network to comply. So that's just a really important component. And then the pre-screening survey we talked about with the differential adjusted payment is going to help us prioritize those providers who might need more technical assistance. So we're going to probably start with you because we want to get you. So again, it's important for you to be honest and candid with the survey so that we know who's going to need the most support, because it's really going to be up to you to help us determine where you are. And then if for some reason we don't reconnect with you later and you revealed something that would have been important for us to know early on, that jeopardizes your ability to provide Medicaid services after March of 2022. CMS has been very clear about that. So it's much better to be transparent and discuss what your challenges are. So one of the questions, Danielle, is about the assessment and saying the yes or no. Can you kind of go back to talk about, because it could be, yes, our facility allows for this, it can accommodate this, but some of the folks in our facility can't have access to that. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how they would respond yes or no and what you would expect to see?
Absolutely. So I cannot stress how important it is that when you fill out the self-assessment, you do it from the point of view of a member who has no health and safety or guardian restrictions or issues. You know, even if that magical member doesn't actually exist in your setting, that's how you want to fill out the assessment. It's going to be for your member that needs no intervention from you. It's how you want to fill it out. So we understand that your members will have health and safety restrictions on an individualized basis to that person-centered planning process. And that's what that whole person-centered planning process is for. But because that is individualized, we don't expect that person-centered planning process will feed into your policies and procedures. Those would be more general, based on your setting as a whole, not taking into consideration those individual health and safety needs. And we will be releasing shortly, hopefully very soon within the next couple months, a companion guide that will go along with the self-assessment that'll help clarify some of the more confusing items and provide instructions, and some of your Q&A from today will feed the clarification that I put into this companion guide.
Thank you, Danielle. So moving on to the next question, there's a question about the DAP. I just want to stress that we haven't finalized that yet, so it's not, we don't know for sure if that's going to happen. We wanted to make you aware of it in full transparency, so if we do allow for that, you have the information you need to be able to get that. Access posts a list of qualifying providers on their website based upon when that's required to be posted, and that's how you're informed that you are an eligible provider. And we've set up the registration process in a way that gives us all the documentation to be able to confirm your participation and attendance. So a question about service specifications and support coordinator training. I think this is specific to the DD side of the All-Text program. We know that our transition plan actually outlines specific things around service specifications that will need to be looked at. And that's the next phase of our transition plan planning or implementation, and the work groups that Access has established, which does include providers. We'll start working through those to identify, to make sure those are consistent with the rules as we expect them to be applied in practice. Another comment also about the role of support coordinators. So as Danielle mentioned, there's this parallel kind of person-centered planning effort that's happening right now, and that includes case management training. we actually did bring this forward to all of the health plans a month or so ago, because some of the providers were saying, we're starting to talk about this, but some of the case managers aren't aware. So that training is kind of actively happening as we're speaking. We're also going to be posting the new person-centered plan that everybody's going to use. And I'm saying everybody. It's going to include DDD as well. And that will go in effect, we're planning like July of this year. And we're going to post that soon and give you all an opportunity to take a look at that. I will tell you, the plan is a documentation tool. It's a guide to help facilitate a conversation. And you will see clearly after attending these sessions how we've integrated the HCBS rules and the role of the case manager or support coordinator in this process. So we do need you to, as we continue to implement, to let us know how that's going. Are there challenges and things like that with anything new? There will be, but that's also an opportunity for us to do some re-engagement, retraining. We have 2 years, and we're going to use that 2 years to test, implement, try, do again, redo, and then we'll all be in a good position in 2 years from now. But there will be some growing pains, and we expect that. Okay, so I think we are wrapping up. I'm just seeing if there's a critical, and please note that we have all of your questions. We have a colleague of ours that's taking them all, and we'll be categorizing them and facilitating them. You can continue to send questions our way, as Danielle mentioned, via the HCBS. We will acknowledge it. If it's something simple we can answer, we will. If it's something that's like, well, this really requires a conversation or discussion, we're going to integrate that into those peer-to-peer sessions that we will have in March and April. So please send them our way. We literally, we are definitely categorizing them and will be using them. I just want to, if we don't say this enough, I think we should say it again, that we know what you all do each and every day is incredibly meaningful to our membership, and we could not be serving members in the least restrictive setting without you. You all have done a lot of creative, innovative work for many, many years. I think what we're asking you to do now is to continue to look at how we elevate, because together I think we can all improve the member experience and really support them to not only be in a least restrictive setting, but have as much of a typical human life experience as you or I would expect to have. We appreciate your commitment to being on this webinar for 2 hours. Sometimes it's really hard to be engaged. You all have been engaged via your questions. You're asking really good questions about how do we operationalize this, which is really where we need you to be, and we're going to try to support you to get there. As well as if you're a provider where you think you might have some of these things kind of figured out, or you're really working on this, let us know who you are, because we would want to talk with you about featuring you as a kind of a peer lead, if you will, in some of these discussions moving forward.
So we're going to close the webinar for today. Thank you all for your participation. Again, we have our constant contact email list that you can sign up for on the HCBS website. Please do that so you can stay informed with the upcoming training sessions and other information that we'll be releasing very soon. Thank you all again for your participation. We truly appreciate it.